By Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Fast. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Public comment, or public officer, public comments.
No public comments.
No public comments. And on to bylaws under 3.1 annual tax rates bylaw 717/2026. I'll turn it over to our CFO.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the rest of council. Every year prior to May 15th, council is required to adopt a set of annual tax rates that you apply to all of the different property classifications in order to raise the required revenues to meet the expenditures and financial obligations of the municipality. With the approval of the budget, we now have all of the pieces in place in order to establish those tax rates. So you have in front of you a draft bylaw. It includes municipal tax rates. It also includes tax rates that we are required to establish for the regional district, so Metro Vancouver tax rates, as well as the Islands Trust. So those three together form the tax rates that are required to be established by bylaw and approved by council, adopted by council prior to May 15th of every given year.
Any questions for the CFO? Fast.
This just is a broader question. I'm looking at the little table. Farmland is taxed at half the rate. Does that mean that's BC assessment approves them as farm?
That's right. Properties within class 9 have a special classification. BC assessment goes through a verification process each year whereby they have to determine that a certain amount of dollars are sold from that property each year in farm goods.
Production.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Morris.
So curiosity question related to that. How many properties are in that farmland category?
Not very many. I'm sorry, I don't have
Yeah,
the exact number. I
I
can,
have a copy of the assessment.
I can, if you want to give me a minute, I can tell you. I don't know if there were any other questions in the meantime.
Back to Councilor Fast.
In the meantime, just if and when we have a supportive housing property in the supportive housing classification, I'm assuming there would be a tax rate with that. Yeah.
Yes,
if-
there would, and I have looked at that a little bit, and typically the rate is the same as the residential rates in other cities, so.
Okay.
Farm 19 properties, 19 properties.
Actually need the 20.
Sorry. There are 19 farm folios, and Councillor Morris said that are actually making the $2,500 per year.
I'm not sure,
I think it is too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
but that's not very much income.
No.
Not see any further questions or comments. I'll look for a motion that the Bowen Island Municipality Annual Tax Rates Bylaw number 717/2026 be read a first, second, third time. Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Fast. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. Yes.
There's been a fair bit of discussion on this council leading up to this with respect to the Islands Trust requisition. And this is this year's requisition, but it is not, the whole issue is not off the table, so there is work being done on this. For the record.
Thank you.
And with that, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Moving on to 4.1, under staff reports, the 2025 audited financial statements. Back over to our CFO.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the rest of council. So as you can see, we have two parallel processes that kind of track this time of year. So we've got the budget and the tax rates, and then we also in the background, we also undertake our annual audited financial statements. So today we are, and I did see the auditor online with Zoom there. She is joining us today at this meeting. There she is. Jennifer and Christine Simpson, our auditors from BDO. Thank you. So today we are presenting the audited financial statements for council approval. They too have a deadline of May 15th that must be submitted to the province prior to that date. So to just start, I just would like to thank the work of the finance staff for working hard through this period to get it done, to get the work done in order to produce the audited financial statements. And also thank you to the support from our auditors to work with us and help us to get this done every year. They do a lot of checking and a lot of line by line going through my numbers, and I appreciate all of the detailed work that they do. So thank you very much. Starting, I'll just quickly just highlight some of the things on our statement of financial position that's on page 22 of your audit agenda package today. You'll see our total assets are 17,404,000 at December 31st, 2025. It's made up of about $7.5 million of cash. That's about $2 million less than we had this time last year because of course, we've completed those capital projects. So we burned through quite a bit of cash. So we are sitting with less cash in the bank at this time of year. Our accounts receivable was quite a bit higher. We did sell the fire hall very close to the end of the year last year. However, we didn't receive the funding until after January. So we had a significant receivable there. Portfolio investments, there was little change. We didn't sell any, we didn't buy any. All we did was reinvest the proceeds, the investment proceeds that we earned throughout the year. Our accounts payable was quite a bit lower. And again, that tracks along with the completion of the capital projects. We didn't have big accounts payable owing to any contractor at the end of the year. Deferred revenue was quite similar. Those are things that we're holding. We haven't earned them yet. They're things like our housing accelerator funds and a lot of grant revenues that we have to wait until we spend before we spend the expenses before we pull those into revenue and recognize them. Temporary borrowing has increased significantly, 1.2 million last year. It's now 3.3 million. And that's because of the Blue Water completion of the work on the Blue Water water project. That's going to sit in temporary borrowing. It does need to be converted into long-term debt. Given the volatility with interest rates and the likelihood of increased interest rates in the short term, I'm going to hold that in temporary borrowing until things settle down from a world economic perspective. If we were to lock that in now, we'd probably be locking into a higher rate of interest. If we sit back and wait and let things settle down a bit, interest rates, I believe, will likely come down. We have 5 years in which to convert that to long-term debt. So I don't want to make any rash decisions right now, and we'll just hang off and leave that in temporary borrowing for the time being. Our long-term debt, it's down by the principal payments on the long-term loans. Those loans are Fire Hall, Community Center, and the long-term community lands, as well as the Cove Bay water treatment plant loan. Tangible capital assets, net book value of 110,334. We did acquire just over $8 million in capital assets this year, and we expensed just shy of $2.6 million in amortization. On our statement of operations, page 23 of 78, you'll see our revenues were very much in line with what we budgeted. Our grant revenues, there was some variability there. We had $3 million budgeted, and we actually recognized $2.3 million in grant revenue. And those are due to capital projects. They didn't roll out according to the timeline that we had expected them to. Investment income was a little bit higher than budget. We earned $501,000 and we had budgeted $481,000. And lastly, that big gain on sale of tangible capital assets. We did sell a fire truck during the year, and we also sold the fire hall. So that's where that big gain is coming from, our disposition of that fire hall property to BC Hydro. Most of our expenses were very much in line with what we had budgeted for the year, leaving us with an annual surplus of $4,524,763. Now that is, of course, our surplus under GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, and how we report it. This is consolidated, so it's got all of the water systems, all of the sewer systems, everything all together. As well, when you're reporting statement of operations under this way, we aren't expensing what we spend on capital projects. So what is showing as a $4 million surplus, I don't want you to think that we have $4 million sitting in the bank that we didn't spend. That's not the case. We took that $4 million and we invested it into our tangible capital assets. We took that $4 million and we invested it into our reserves. So when we talk to council and we communicate what our operating surplus is, that's our actual operating revenues, less our departmental expenses and less anything that we put into reserves or anything that we transfer into capital. We communicate that surplus to council on an interim basis. And for 2025, our operating surplus was about $243,000 on our budget. So that is about 2.6% of our overall operating budget. So if we took in $100, that means that we spent about 97.4% of that $100 that we took in. Either put it into reserve, spent it on operations, or paid off debt, or invested it into capital assets. So my point is, I think that we are budgeting for what we need, we're collecting what we need, and we're not collecting tax revenue that is ending up unspent at the end of the year. Accumulated surplus, that is the total sum of our accumulating operating surpluses for all current and prior years. And at the end of 2025, our accumulated surplus was $109,338,604. On page 9 of the report, it details, breaks it out, what those surpluses, what they are, which funds the surpluses are attributable to. I did include in the report a little blurb for each of the water systems. I think I'll leave that for the report for those users who are interested in learning a little bit more about their particular water system. And at the end of the audited financial statements, they are, I will stress, they are not part of the audited financial statements. They're unaudited schedules that just have been added. I know council has made some requests for additional information about the position of water systems at the end of the year. So I included that just for information. They are internally prepared schedules and they are not considered part of the audited financial statements. So with that, I will turn it back to council. Have you any questions? I'm happy to answer them. And I believe that the auditor is going to provide their report. We did receive an unqualified audit opinion this year for 2025. That means that the auditor has not expressed any concerns with the financial statements and believes that they present fairly the position of the municipality at December 31st.
Thank you, our CFO. Councilor Morse.
Sorry, but we're supposed to be asking the audit. So under the asset retirement obligations, which is note 7, the wording is sort of the same as last year, but we've gotten rid of the old fire hall.
Correct.
So how many buildings are left?
The library and there are outbuildings at the workshop. There's still structures there that we believe would
So there's
reasonably expected to
There's
contain
only one
asbestos.
building at the works yard?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I thought there was only one, so
Yeah.
that's why I was curious about that. And if they all got a useful life of 35 to 50 years?
The library has an extended useful life and the works yard has that is at its fully
Yeah. it
that's
says of
been
which
fully
two to
expensed,
50
yeah.
years. And then unappropriated surplus in note 8. Is that adequate for working capital purposes?
I believe we should still be working to increase that. If we expect our operating budget is about $9 million, I would like to see our working capital at 50% of that. So
There's the policy.
and will be also included in the revised budgeting policy once that's done. You don't collect your taxes until halfway through the year, so you need enough money to get you through till June 30th every year. Yeah, so I think that a balance of $4.5 million in accumulated surplus would be appropriate for a municipality our size.
And then under 10, under contingent liabilities, and maybe this is a question for the closed meeting. Part C, have we been named in any lawsuits or do we think there's any pending?
There's nothing at this point that we are aware of, so there's nothing been disclosed in the contingent liability section.
Okay. And so the other community grants is a lot higher, and I'm on note 14 now. A lot higher than it has been in previous years. It's 10,000 versus 4,000. So, what's the threshold for detail? I mean, there's other grants that are listed that are 1,500, whatever. So why didn't we provide more detail for other community grants?
The other community grants this year is actually kind of a weird one. It's a flow-through grant from the Community Foundation where they granted through us as agent in order to facilitate a grant to the men's basketball in order to rebuild all of the bleachers last year at the baseball field. It wasn't really it wasn't a Bowen Island municipality grant per se. We acted just as agents. So I
So
just,
that's different from the Bowen Island Men's Fast Pitch Society, 12,500.
oh, no, I'm sorry. You know what? That is it. I made a mistake. Sorry, page.
No, 14.
I actually gotta go back and find it. Yeah, you know what? At the same time, it might just have been a space requirement too. Yeah, 10,000.
We could get details what those other.
Oh, certainly you can have details if you want them. Yeah, I'm sorry, I spoke out of turn. I didn't realize that I disclosed that one separately.
And on the Schedule 1 of tangible capital assets.
Mhm.
There's still 1.6 under construction, so what is it?
That is the work that was, for the most part, it's the work that was completed on the Eagle Cliff water treatment
Okay.
main project, but there's also about $250,000 of work to date on the works yard upgrade, some design work that's been completed. So about 250,000 of that is related to that work.
And a question, I think the tangible capital assets schedule, it would, I think the water systems would really like to see one for theirs. As to what their assets are by the water systems. They're not included in here because they're not part.
They are included in here.
They're in the water infrastructure line,
Yeah,
so it would be really interesting to see what the capital, what the actual assets are for each water system.
it would be broken out. It would come with additional costs. And we're already paying over $80,000 a year for our audit fees, and I'm sure that
So
the
that could be,
auditors could give us a price to break that out
Could
and
be an
provide services for that too.
could be an unaudited thing, I guess. If somebody else has got some other questions, go ahead, because I could flip back through my pages here.
I see, Councillor Saunders online.
Thank you through the chair. On the statement of operations, there's a significant difference in the provincial transfer, like $750,000 from what had been either hoped for or expected. I don't know which it is. I'm just curious, does that shortfall, does that lead to us, the municipality, incurring some debt around that? Or does it just ultimately mean, well, the tax rate's going to have to be minusculely higher to cover that?
No, neither of those actually either.
Or neither?
No, it's a timing difference. So during the budget, I was hopeful that we would have progressed much further ahead on the Eagle Cliff project. However, there was some delay in getting that started. So that is the revenue that will be associated with the work that eventually takes place on that project. So it's just not recognized in 2025. It'll be recognized in 2026 when the balance of the work gets done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you,
My
Councillor.
other question. So the BC Hydro solar panel rebate, was that for the solar panels on the fire hall?
Correct.
And the BC Healthy Living Recreation Grant of 50,000?
Mhm.
Who was that, what was that for? Was
Uh,
that just for here?
Fitness equipment, the new gym equipment.
Okay. And then I was curious as to why we got a donation for the knick-knack nuts.
We are acting as the agent to collect funds. There's an agreement that was signed between the Nipmuc and the municipality. We are acting as agents so that some tax receipts can be issued for collections of those funds. They are seeking to construct a new replacement building on that side.
So they're not a registered charity?
No.
Didn't know.
That's why we've signed the agreement
That's
with
why I
them.
asked the question. I thought
Yeah.
they were. Okay, that's good to know.
I'm not seeing any further questions or comments around the room, so I'll look for a motion by council approved.
Yeah, auditors.
Oh, yes, auditors are here first for a report. With you, Ms. Simpson and Barkman.
Thank you for having us. So I'll just go through the highlights. Happy to be here. I'd like to thank Kristen and Delphine, Merwin, and their staff for their hard work during the audit process. It was very smooth this year. I can emphasize that I think we're here about 3 weeks earlier than we have been in the past. So that goes to show that it was well organized and well prepared. There were no material adjustments during the audit, no new significant internal control matters. The only significant non-routine transaction was the fire hall sale, which we reviewed all the appropriate documentation on that. And we continued to have discussions with management on the current status of the water treatment plant. And we agree with management that an impairment is not needed at this time. In terms of materiality, the amount was set at $2 million for the municipality, but I will remind everybody we use a lower threshold for the non-capital operations. So to make sure that the materiality is not set too high due to the large balance of capital, we have sort of 2 thresholds. We continue to report any differences to management and council that are in excess of 5% or $10,000. I'm happy to note that there are no fraud matters to report to you, and I'll remind council or the committee that any fraud concerns should be brought directly to the auditors, directly to me by email or in camera, just to make sure that they're properly investigated if there are any concerns. I'll remind you that we are following public sector accounting standards, and the financials are drafted and presented by management as you just walked through. Our opinion states that there are no material misstatements with the figures, and we are not commenting on the unaudited schedules as Kristen noted. We do have a limited amount of work around IT systems to ensure that the general controls are effective. We have looked at the capital projects. I would say the capital projects in themselves are not where the complications are. It is typically the associated capital grants and the recognition of that revenue. So we have reviewed those samples of those agreements. And as I mentioned, we don't have any significant internal control deficiencies or new items, but we continue to comment on a few items around segregation of duties, which is not unusual for a municipality of this size of team. So I would say that those are standard recommendations. So in terms of the audit, we are substantially complete. We're just awaiting the final approval procedures here and subsequent events, so we'll be ready to sign off at that time. And I want to thank management again for their hard work and cooperation. I'm happy to take the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. I'll look around the table here for any questions. Not seeing any, so the recommendation before us, the council approved the December 31st, 2025 audited financial statements. Moved by Councilor Fast, seconded by Councilor Getty. Any further debate? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Those are approved.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much to our CFO.
Thank you.
For all of that work and our finance team. Next up on the agenda is moving to a closed meeting. I have a motion by council move to a closed meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 91L of the community charter. Moved by Councilor Getty and Councilor Morse. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. A motion to adjourn, please. By Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Bates. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. And that